One of the more popular terms that have come from the East is the word karma. In the third teaching, the Dalai Lama explains the Buddhist understanding of the word and shows how deepening our comprehension of karma leads us back on the chain of dependent origination to the origin of suffering, which is the fundamental ignorance at the root of our existence. This, in turn, leads us to an understanding that suffering can be overcome, which is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. Karma is mistakenly understood in the West as almost identical to the Western notion of destiny or fate. Most people think it's responsible for what happens to them. They say, it's my karma, or it's my fate. But the Buddhist idea is somewhat different. The central notion about karma in Buddhism is that it is the evolutionary result of an intentional act. Whatever we do with intention has an evolutionary impact on us. Furthermore, every act produces results, some beneficial, some detrimental, and some a mixture of the two. When we trace the effects of our actions, the law of karma becomes intimately connected with Buddhist morality. How should we act in any given situation? It is not something imposed from without as an absolute moral code. It arises out of every situation quite naturally, once we become aware of the workings of the law of cause and effect. How do the workings of karma tie into the search for liberation from samsara, the frustrating, self-centered life cycle? This returns us to the fundamental confusion or ignorance at the base of our existence. From this ignorance arise afflictive emotions. These emotions create negative actions, which produce more suffering and unfortunate karma, which will ripen in the future. It's apparent that the afflictive emotions are a real obstacle that must be removed if we are to approach the third noble truth, which is the liberation from suffering. Another Buddhist term widely misunderstood in the West is anatman, which has been variously translated as egolessness, selflessness, and even soullessness. Anatman is the word used by the Buddha to describe the ultimate nature of reality. It is a synonym of emptiness. It's a very subtle concept, and many Western commentators have used the notion of selflessness to highlight what they mistakenly think is the nihilism of Buddhism. At this point in the teachings, the Dalai Lama lays out the tenets of the middle path consequence school of Buddhism, the Madhyamaka Prasangika, that demonstrates that the soul, self, or I that is being negated is only the notion of an independently existent I, an intrinsically objective I. The relative self is never denied. The relative soul is never denied. The self that exists is therefore not mere nothingness, but a self that, by virtue of its emptiness, is interrelated with the totality of the world. The person who believes that the self is a permanent, separate existence will always see a fundamental division with the world, will always be tormented by the consequences of this division. I and not I, mine and not mine, desire and aversion, love and hate, life and death. Out of this fundamental duality spring all the afflictive emotions and the karmic acts that perpetuate suffering. Ignorance misunderstands the self to be something absolute apart from the world. Wisdom understands the lack of such an absolute self, thus recognizing the existence of a relative self that is related with and interconnected with the world. The Dalai Lama brings home the point that insight into the nature of the self is what the Four Noble Truths are all about.
Oh. Yeah. I'm here. Yeah.
Lovely to see you. Beautiful.
Yes. General, 동네 ene mendu shindu da 동네 gyuraya chinjungda ene dawan de shin du ji de gyu chin ji ma lo ba ji bu ge da du mo tu ya di ene ga re lam ba slam na mong ba wang ge yu ge ba che mong ba de le ya ene da chu ji ran shay yun du land la mong ba da de khona ni lo mong ba sin mong ba ni shay mi ya re.
So yesterday we spoke about the fact that what we naturally desire is happiness and a wish to overcome suffering. But in contrary to our natural aspiration, often we tend to create more conditions for our suffering, and also we are ignorant of the ways of creating causes for our own happiness. So what we found is at the root of all of this is a fundamental confusion, or in Buddhist language it is called the fundamental ignorance. And this is sort of a state of confusion in relation to not only the way things are, but also in relation to way causes and effects sort of follow each other, and causes and effects relate to each other. Therefore, in Buddhism, when we talk about fundamental ignorance or avidya, we talk about two levels of ignorance. One is the ignorance or confusion relating to the laws of causality, the laws of the karma. And the second one is confusion or ignorance pertaining to our understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. And these two types of ignorance or confusions are related to the two levels of understanding of dependent origination, or pratitya samuppada, that we spoke about earlier. The understanding of the pratitya samuppada in terms of dependent origination, in terms of causal dependence, will enable us to dispel this confusion pertaining to karmic laws or causality, and understanding or deep insight into the interdependent origination in terms of the ultimate nature of reality will enable us to dispel the confusion or ignorance that pertains to our understanding of the ultimate nature of reality.
Now, any two Maribu the Chigor Veslavna, Tamamibari. Maribu Te Wang Le, any Nyumba Sham Gucci, Tayonde Yare. Senator Mambane Subina, and the Sibes are Traja troops, Jenny, Tawanga, the Demingas, and about China in the Shabbat. Dagana Shingi, any near Nyumba, Nishu, Dindita Sonche.
So, however, this does not mean that this ignorance or confusion is the only cause of our enlightened existence. Of course, there are many other derivative causes, which or conditions, which in Buddhist language is sort of technically called afflictive emotions and thoughts, and this is a very sort of complex class of emotions and thoughts, and we find sort of detailed descriptions of these emotions and thoughts in the Abhidhamma literature. For example, according to Abhidhamma literature, there is an understanding that there are 6 sort of root emotions, negative emotions, or thoughts, out of which arises 20 sort of secondary types of emotions and thoughts. So there is a complex explanation of the world of emotion and thoughts.
Nga shung nala ne enya ene ngo gyawa yimba yaji luma ten yinde ba tindegi ta namdo ya mindawa gyaju sam soni rangshin gyaju kundos de ya sigo khwa gi du shabre.
And also we find sort of another sort of further explanation of the process of being in an enlightened existence in the tantric Vajrayana literature, where there is an understanding of what is known as the 80 types of thoughts or conceptions, which are indicative of our being in unenlightened existence.
중국 중에 포획 박사서 시리아래. 포획 박사. 감 포획 박사. 고양 고아루야 둘이야.
Similarly, in the Kala Chakra literature, which belongs to the Vajrayana class, there is also a further identification of factors or causes of samsaric existence or unenlightened existence, which are understood in terms of propensities or natural dispositions.
다들에게 에네 녀몽베다 자치다잖아 녀몽베 군중 세아디 디니 레지 군중 세아디 용기해 버리. 자다 가다 코아주지 둘이야 레뉴 군중 니셰.
So these emotions or afflictive emotions and thoughts which arise from our fundamental state of confusion and then give rise to, or they motivate volitional actions. So together the delusions and karmic actions or karma are the origins of our suffering.
다 지단에는 용문부 지천이 그리 시작했을라나 아니 강충나 다 시바 근리시 아니 가다 런줄이 게임도잖아요. 아니 랑준이 강사디 머시워증이 규 머시워증이 그라 심주럽도 머시워증이 근데지리야 심주럽도 머시워 제배 관에 랑준이 강사 녀몽으로 제배지리야 아니 녀몽스라고
Generally speaking, klesha or afflictive emotions and thoughts are defined as that emotion or thought which the mere occurrence of that in ourselves creates immediate disturbance within our mind and then afflicts from within. And that is the sort of general definition of klesha.
다 레지 군중사 레스야데 지단다 레스 랜데 세대야데 유단 데뷔 다 윤대긴 대회 침입시 가산 시분이지 거기 랑싱기다 유해되지.
So what do we mean by karma? If that is the definition of afflictive emotions or thought, what is the definition of karma? Here, I would like to remind again to situate our understanding of karma within the context of wider Buddhist understanding of the natural laws of causality. Karma is an instance of the natural causal laws that operate within the world, within the universe, or within the natural world, where there is an understanding according to Buddhism that things and events come into being purely as a result of aggregation of causes and conditions. Similarly, karma is an instance of that. Now, the unique feature of karma is that karma involves an intentional action. Karma involves an agent. When we talk about natural processes in the world, although the processes, there is a cause and effect, sort of causal processes operating in the world, but where there is no agents involved, we cannot really talk about karma, because karma needs, in order for a causal process to be a karmic causal process, there is a need for an agency, there is a need for an agent, an individual whose intention would lead to a particular action. And that type of causal nexus or causal mechanism is known as the karma.
저 다오든지 아니 레틀이야 아니 나우시기 데부 가서 그게 디지용에 될래야 아니 계획명다 데부 동행해야 될래야 아니 다 디계명다 Then the was what on the Lumating Minta. Janeta le gave me Lumating lesson sharing.
So within that karmic action, generally speaking, we can talk about three types of actions corresponding to the effects they produce. The actions which produce suffering or pain, suffering and pain are generally speaking considered negative actions or non-virtuous actions, whereas actions that lead to positive consequences, desirable consequences, experiences of joy and happiness, these actions are considered to be positive or virtuous actions. Whereas there is a third category of actions which leads to experiences of sort of equanimity or states of neutral feelings or experiences. These are considered to be neutral actions, neither virtuous nor non-virtuous.
More one of my shame is an assembly search. That assembly is no good thing, said Ajida. Any assembly is that day in the Lunga Yoa. The Niji, down Moyokone, assembly, Chachik. Diana, together, so leg, Chevan Juice, and Goyokone Shavina. So in terms of actual nature of the karmic actions themselves, we can talk about two different types of karma. One is the mental karmic acts, sort of actions which need not necessarily be manifested in behavioral or physical kind of actions, but rather they are more like mental acts. Then there could be also physical actions like bodily acts or verbal acts. So principally there are two types of actions. Similarly, from the point of view of mediums through which the actions are expressed or executed, we can talk about actions of the mind or actions of the speech or actions of the body. Similarly, in the scriptures, we also find discussions about karmic actions which are sort of completely virtuous, karmic actions which are completely non-virtuous or negative. Then there are karmic actions which are sort of mixture of the two. So I feel that many of us who practice the Dharma and who believes in the Dharma, perhaps most of our actions may be sort of a mixture of the two. Any machine nego, jug nego cheni. Jong jusum kita kabarle le top chiku kabayong yare.
And
le karbu inere, le migyo inere, kada niga lo jawa machine jug. Dende kita kasol bege tengne, ene le tuchimbu chaya da yang chik. Bena jawa nego, bena le dibur chibe ina, jawa nego le ya gunung be shuk chabu chibe ine, yang chik jugli ya chik gyabashku chibu lebe soro.
So if we look at, say, even a single karmic instance of a karmic action, we can see that there are stages within that event. There is a beginning, which is the stage of the motivation or intention. Then there is the actual execution of the act. Then there is one could say, the culmination or the completion of the act. So depending on how these stages are carried out, in the scriptures there is an understanding that the intensity or the force of the karmic action can vary. For example, in the case of a negative action, if the person at the stage of motivation may have a very strong negative emotion, a forceful anger or whatever, a forceful and negative motive, and then acts out on an impulse, carries out that action, but immediately afterwards feels deep regret for the act that is committed. So that action would be less forceful, because the three stages, the motivation, the actual action, and the completion were not complete, not completely fulfilled. Therefore, that action would be seen as less forceful compared to an instance where the person has acted out completely with a strong motivation, actual execution, and a sense of taking pleasure or satisfaction at the act committed. Similarly, there could be instances where the individual may have a very weak motivation, but some circumstances forces the individual to actually commit the act. But even in that case, although the negative act is committed, but it would be less forceful because the strong motivating force wasn't there. So depending on how forceful the motivation and the actual act and the completion are, there is a varying degrees of force and intensity of the karma.
No, today that really a strong juxene. Did I cover your into any Kasobuke Sal Macheva Chala Masaba Chasaniga Town, Chasaniga Maimba, the Shishido.
Because of these differences in the scriptures, we find discussions of 4 types of karma. Karma which is executed but not accumulated. And then there is a karma which is accumulated but not executed. And then a karma where the act is both executed and also the karma is accumulated. And then karma where there is an absence of both accumulation and the actual execution of the act.
So today you say le geve chalaya any gulung da jig kaso bege shukshimbuji yongtuya gulung ya wuji gulung dabda nebaji mushi duwe negole chokhanjine bege da bege 비중 소거지 다가는 신 룰에 개와 모다 제수 이랑치야 엔 톱나 디가라 미미기 겐데치야 도스 차베이나 아니 개와도 dobsham 차베야 다 미기에 차려야 그저 투도 당분에 지금 다시 숙타고 마요야 다 아니 바르도 이네 그게 다 개벨랩도 타만 룰이야 아니 간다 개벨 시작점치야.
Once you understand the importance of this point, the significance of this point, and also once you understand that even within a single act, there are different stages to the actual act, that the karma itself is a composite, sort of a cumulative act. Once you appreciate that fact, then whenever you have the opportunity to engage in a positive action, then as a practitioner, it is important to ensure that at the initial stage, your motivation is very strong, your positive motivation is strong, and you have a strong intention to engage in the act. And while you are actually executing the act, you should ensure that you have given all your best. You have put all your effort into sort of a successful action of the karma. And then not only that, but at the end, once the act is committed, it is important to ensure that you dedicate the karma, the positive karma that you have accumulated or created towards the well-being of sentient beings and your own attainment of enlightenment and so on. And especially if one can sort of reinforce that dedication with an understanding of the empty nature, the ultimate nature of reality, even then it will be more forceful. Similarly, when as a practitioner, of course, ideally one should try to avoid from engaging in any negative actions at all. But even if you find yourselves in a situation where you are committing a negative or non-virtuous action, it is important to make sure that at least the motivation is not strong. There is no strong emotion involved. Similarly, even when you are acting, while you are acting, executing the action, if there is a strong sort of conscience pangs or sort of sense of regret or sense of kind of remorse, then of course the negative act, though committed, will be very weak. Similarly, this should not be followed by any sense of satisfaction. You should not take joy in any negative actions that is committed, but rather you should feel deep remorse and regret, and then immediately you should follow the act by, if possible, purification of that negativity. So if you can do that, if you can live a way of life where this is your way of relating to the sort of positive and negative actions, then you will be able to follow the law of the teachings of the karma in a much more effective way.
나 미기회 레 dom구여나 미기회 컨트레스라비나 아니 낭주기 가서 그러다 슝망고 나로네 지웅구송야리야 아니 미기 주본 수dun고 예소.
So although there are many different types of negative actions, but in most of the Buddhist scriptures, when the teachings on the karma and is presented, all the negative actions are sort of condensed or summarized in the form of what is known as the avoidance from the 10 negative actions or 10 non-virtuous actions. These being 3 actions of body, and 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. The 3 bodily acts being avoiding from, 3 bodily negative actions being killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, and 4 actions of speech being telling lies, engaging in divisive speech, speech which are divisive, and using harsh words, and engaging in just sort of senseless gossip, and the 3 mental actions being covetousness and harmful intention, harboring harmful thoughts, and holding wrong views. So for an ideal practicing Buddhist Dharma practitioner must live a way of life where the individual avoids from all of these negative actions, if possible from all of them, if not at least refraining from as many of these actions as possible. And so leading a way, sort of ethically disciplined way of life, whereby you avoid from these actions, is called leading a moral life according to the Buddhist understanding.
십계변 안에 선하면 뭐 당분도 봐도 다는 더버시 타마다시 군도 드시니 캐바인 소원은 시전이 또 라린께도 전에 림바 당고디 땅에 두스샤 낭주근 조단디 두저 탈바샤체 두저 탈바샤네 아니 뒤주야 준다래야 뉴몬로다 가서 그게 냠부 때는 뉴몬을 갑대지 않아 뉴몬도 탑고야지 난 뉴몬을 깨워치고 야래 난 뉴몬을 깨워쳐발이야 냐라 리시기 팔라 뉴몬을 깨토야 가고리 근데 상황이 있잖아요 뉴몬배 샹왕도 균네 아니 내주 편대하게 내주들이 뭐버디 다시 못한 걸 시작해 말이에요. 대내日本이버데 내주들이 편하게 싸외 교류 진행이 뉴몬을 내못돼야. 대내日本수버디 뉴몬 대샤고 파자를 내못돼야. 되셔야 돼.
So the general mode of procedure of a spiritual practitioner in Buddhism, someone who is sort of engaging on a spiritual path towards enlightenment, according to Buddhism, is that at the initial stage, at the beginner's stage, such a person's, such a practitioner's ultimate aspiration is to attain liberation from samsara, to attain freedom or attain spiritual freedom or enlightenment. So, therefore, one of the principal tasks of such a practitioner is to gain victory over the kleshas, over our negative and afflictive emotions and thoughts. But at the initial stage, there is no way that the practitioner can directly combat with our kleshas, with our afflictive emotions and thoughts. So the sensible way to proceed at the beginning is to find a way of coping with the expression of these negative emotions and thoughts. These are our conducts, the negative actions of body, speech, and mind. So therefore, the first step towards attaining that ultimate aspiration of gaining victory over kleshas is to guard our body and mind and speech from engaging in negative actions, so that we don't give in to the power and domination of afflictive emotions and thought. And then once you have achieved that stage, the first stage, then you can proceed on to the second stage, which is to then tackle the root cause, which is the fundamental confusion that we spoke about earlier, the ignorance. And then that is when at that stage, then you can directly counteract the forces of the kleshas, the afflictive emotions and thoughts. And once you have done that, the third stage is not only to simply gain victory over these delusions, but also to root out even all the propensities and imprints left by these delusory states of mind within our mind, within our psyche. Therefore, Aryadeva states in the 400 verses on Madhyamaka, or middle way, that a true spiritual aspirant must at the beginning overcome negative behavior actions, negative actions of body, speech, and mind, and then in the middle phase must counter this grasping at self or ego, and then finally, in the final stage, then the aspirant should overcome all sort of views that bind us within the samsaric realm.
다데 레지 군주다 용모배 군주스 다니 다데 안다간저 레지 군주네 에네 다 말아주 버게다 류르다 다딱 되게 도된 셔야 도된 뇌지 도된다 주의 도된스 다도 셔윤드잖아 다데 레지 그네스 도다 셔윤드 에네 심매바 지르바 심매바스 내면도 다 그걸 루부르 질려 레디기 즉 사바시 두세야디에 배지여서 말이 친내이네 나도 난주이네 가다지 거래다 변 풍부균 거래 취되듯이 년齡의 균지 여덟시 근데 균디 때문에 아니 디두기 요나서 영향이 아니 다땡 요원도 돼야 돼 변 친내이네 나도 그 동네 장영야 그게 갱신에게 그 넘버로 돼야다 다른 신기 주기 풍부이네 그 다른 신기 그 디두기 체집이나 디두기 단 요나서 영향이 넘준다면도 영향 디디다 렉처 용해 자야변의 친내지 거바드 차샤네 그 타야 또 윤두잖아요 중앙하다 타도 윤두 스페이스 바트가 도되네 난 주기 풍부도 차샤네 그래야 타야 또 윤두잖아요 스페이스 바트가 도되네.
So when Buddhism talks about how both the environment and the sentient beings living in the environment are consequences or are results of this fundamental confusion, the ignorance, and the karma, particularly the karma. We should not have a notion that karma sort of produces these things from out of nowhere. That is not the case. Karma is not like a kind of an eternal cause, but rather we must understand that in order for karma to operate, in order for karma to have the potential to create its consequences, there must be a base, there must be a basis. So therefore, both in terms of the physical world and also our mental world, the continuum is always there. For example, like in the case of the physical world, you can trace the continuum of the physical world to the beginning of a particular universe, and then according to Buddhism, you can trace that beginning even to a stage of empty space, where there is an acceptance of what is known as space particles, although I mean, that's not the the best translation, Namkhe Dul. There is an acceptance of a stage of empty space during which all the origins or the source of the material physical universe is in some sense is contained there. Similarly, in the case of the mental world, so far as the continuum of consciousness is concerned, so far as the continuum of the sentient beings are concerned, this would also include the world of the consciousness as well. So far as the actual continuum is concerned, we cannot say that this is a result of karma.
And body also.
In the case of body as well, we cannot say this. The sort of unending process of the continuity of both matter and mind is not a result of karma. Now the question is, where does karma fit in? At what point does karma, plays a causal role in producing sentient beings and the environment, the natural environment in which the sentient beings live? Perhaps one could say that there is this natural process in the world, and at a point where the evolution has reached a stage where it can affect the experiences of the sentient beings, giving rise to either painful or pleasurable experiences of suffering, or giving rise to pleasurable or joyful experience of suffering. That is the point where karma begins to come into the picture, because karmic process can be made sense only in relation to sentient beings' experiences, be it suffering or be it pleasure or joy.
Bena, around Bena, Jiwam, Kansa, that Jusum, Kansa Slona, Kansa lectures, Mari. But Nabashivas at lectures, Mari Secretary. That me Pumbu. Pungu delated me Nabashivala, lectures, Recabo gave a lecture. That was your.
So, for example, if the question is asked whether consciousness is produced by karma,
or Kansakura being,
whether the sentient beings are produced by karma, it seems the answer should be in the negative, to say no. But if the question is the human body a product of karma? Is the human consciousness a product of karma? Then the answer would be yes, because human body and human consciousness are consequences of positive actions, virtuous actions. Because when we are talking about human body and human consciousness, we are already talking about a sort of a state of existence which deals directly with experiences of an individual's pain and pleasure. Similarly, if we were asked the question whether this natural aspiration that I spoke about earlier, this natural instinctual desire to seek happiness and overcome suffering, is that a product of karma? it seems the answer would be no.
자, today we do that. 다른 식 변화 월다 변화 가설 개조는 식 변화 빅방들이 용돼야 되디. 빅방지기 단 넘줄 컨데지 차다 맞았어야 돼. 렉더야 돼. 저당 거라 causality 두스 용돼버디 렉 말해.
Similarly, when we think about the evolution of the physical universe at large, yesterday we spoke a bit about the Big Bang theory and its implications for Buddhist cosmology. One could say that, generally speaking, so far as the natural processes of sort of cause and effects in the physical world is concerned, so far as that process is concerned, I don't think we can say that it's a product of karma. But so the process of causes and effects in the natural world takes place regardless of karma. But in what form that process or in what direction that process would lead to, then of course karma will have a role to play.
자, 드레이버 이두산에 그게 가서 그게 먼저 그게 짜바체스들이야. 짜바체스 유들이야. 아니 그게 가서다. 루부르도 이 두진지 두의 땡기변 유어친데베 릭직. 다른 거 랑싱기 그 춘익이 거를 여댕의 릭직. 야 랑싱기다 춘익이 그게 여댕의 소소소리야 투무모인베야 거를 춘익이 하는 네버르직이야 여대바. 그래서 그 그게 짜바체서 유들이야. 된듯이 예배 인도산에 아니 아주 그게 제배 고스님 누구 제당을 들이야. 아니 리버시고는 제와서 배지 다 도선저 용이어서래. 춘익이 봐. 아니 그래 저시베지고 아니 때베지고 태주지를 봐서네. 이것이 배주셔야 돼.
So what we find here is that in the natural world we find that there are in terms of applying inquiry, in terms of identifying the objects of inquiry from the Buddhist sort of analytical point of view, it seems that one could say that there are two sort of distinct types of objects of inquiry. One object or one realm that is sort of, one could say, natural, where only a natural process of causal laws operate. And then one could also speak about another realm of sort of inquiry, where we can then, as a result of these sort of causal interactions, there are certain properties that are emergent, that are contingent, as a result of these interactions. Because of this distinction in Buddhist scriptures, we find sort of discussion of different avenues of reasoning or different avenues of examining sort of analysis when trying to understand the nature of the world or nature of reality. For example, like in Buddhism, there is a discussion of perhaps what could be called the four principles. One is the natural principle, the fact that things exist, the fact that cause lead to effects. So here there is an appreciation of a principle that is natural. One could almost say there is an acceptance of natural laws. And then based on that natural principle, then you can appreciate certain types of what could be called the principle of efficacy, how given that nature they have the capacity to produce certain results and so on. So there is, one could say, there is a principle of efficacy. And then we can also talk about another principle, that is the principle of dependence. And given this natural law and the principle of efficacy, we also see that there is a kind of a natural dependence between things and events, between causes and effects. And then there is, based on these three principles, then the Buddhist critical analysis sort of talks about how we can apply various types of reasoning or analysis that would enable us to broaden or deepen our understanding of the natural world. Therefore, the fourth principle is accepted, which is the principle of valid proof. That is based on the understanding of these different principles, the principle of natural principle, the principle of dependence, principle of efficacy. Then you can apply you can accept a principle of valid proof that given this, that must be the case. Given that, this should be the case.
So today in the Quran, Chini Nadanda, or Rangjungi, that Korak maybe Shilu di Shevachini, di Shili Shabatane, any that Tedusia di Nalalia, Chinamling, that Tibopon Gawadusa, that did not let you do.
So for a practicing Buddhist who is engaged in the Dharma, it becomes important to appreciate these what could be called facts of the natural world. And then once you have appreciation of these natural principles, the natural principle, the principle of efficacy and dependence, then you are in a position to utilize that knowledge to live a life that would accord with the Dharma principles. And therefore, one could say that then we will be utilizing the principle of valid proof, the way in which we can avoid certain negative actions, the way in which we can enhance our virtuous actions, and so on.
That one pension dress, Nalalia, the leg, that became pension dress, pension to that leg became draw yourself in Nalalia, any that leg became Johannes to was Lavina, effect on this was Lavina. Jada last load action channing, Peranganzu, Sedugi, action gembe, Semek to do, draw but a tonserva. Another action gay, any chidu, soil, and George Wood, it's a samsara. That she's a Tagarisha, principal Tagarisha. The Itane Chen, any Kadachi, Tade, Chawat, Jebe, Gengi, any mountain to do the draw on them. That dinner part of Tom Ring to Tani, any Nangi, that Kadachi cheap and that no you go about the but a Nangi give you and a Pumbu, Nada Shashane, Zawa, any Juanga Gane, Rodigarba. So then Juanga Delia, Chin Juanga, Nanga Juanga le Tara, didn't pay yesterday. Didn't they get on any Jawaji Tugman or something? So the didn't other than Shannon to check how
So the question is, of course, there is a natural world. At a certain point in the causal process, karma comes into the picture. Now the question is, in what sense or in what manner karma affects or interacts with the natural world, the process of the natural causal law. Here, I think perhaps we can relate that to our own personal experience. That from our own personal experience, we know that certain actions that we commit, for example, like in the morning, will have its effect, continuing effect. Even in the evening, it would have created a certain state of mind. It would have had an impact upon our emotion, our kind of sense of being. So even though the act was committed in the morning, an act was an event that was finished, but its effect still lingers on within us. And I think that is the same principle which operates when we talk about karma and its effects, even in the case of long-term karmic effects. So it is on that basis we can understand how karma can create effects which are felt even after a long time after the act was committed. And in the Buddhism, according to Buddhist explanation, of course, the sort of impact of karma could be felt in successive lifetimes as well. Now here, I feel that unless we sort of complement the general explanation of the karmic process in the mainstream Buddhist literature from Vajrayana literature, I don't think our understanding will be comprehensive or complete, because in the Vajrayana tradition there is an appreciation that not only the physical world but also the world of the sentient being, we are all sort of composed of the 5 elements,
sentient beings the
body of the sentient beings. All of us comes from the same material substance. We are all composed of the 5 elements: the earth, water, fire, wind, and the space. And there is in the Vajrayana literature discussion of external elements and internal elements. And there is also
the space literature Italia
so this space here should be understood in terms of the vacuum, the empty space, rather than space in the technical sense of absence of obstruction. So in the Vajrayana literature, there is an understanding of the existence of external elements and the internal elements, and how at a very profound level they are related to each other. So maybe through understanding that relation, one can try to understand in a deeper way the way in which our karma affects the world.
So that shebas laway no kora rangsing yode she. Any that shebalia kora ring ling jungamang do masone cumulate to mare susan lake ya kaure. Such a leg to any young to
So as we discussed earlier, the fact that consciousness exists is a natural fact. The consciousness exists, that is it. And similarly, in terms of the continuum of consciousness, it is again a natural principle. Consciousness maintains its continuity. And according to Buddhism, and there is an understanding that consciousness cannot come into being from nowhere. It cannot come into being without a cause. And also, matter cannot produce consciousness. Consciousness does not come out of matter. Therefore, since consciousness cannot come into being without cause, and since so, of course, that is not to say that matter can affect consciousness. Matter can be a sort of a condition for the arisal of consciousness. But in terms of actual continuum of consciousness, matter cannot produce consciousness. Because when we are talking about consciousness, the nature of consciousness is this mere luminosity, mere experience, knowing faculty, and that cannot be produced from matter. So since consciousness cannot come into being from no cause, nor can it come into being from material cause, therefore consciousness must come from a sort of a ceaseless continuum. And it is, on that premise, Buddhism accepts the existence of beginning, sort of, former lives. Similarly, we also find a lot of individuals who have very clear and vivid memories of their past lives. So when we talk about the origin of suffering, the sources of suffering, although there are karma and delusions, but the primary cause or the principal cause or origin of suffering really is the delusions. So and it seems that depending on different interpretations of the fundamental Buddhist doctrine of anatma, no soul theory, it seems there is also differences in understanding the nature of klesha, nature of afflictive emotions and thoughts.
Pena drumdo wame, pena rangjiwa menshegi, lo tundun ziya, tenjuwe, da che tanje mingi takzamgi, tenjung chamu digi namshagi, ki toane tabayina, yani tab nyumo yinda. Rangjiwa menshegi tabayina, lo tundun ziya, jinde yungu yubari.
For example, that it seems that certain states of mind or certain thoughts and emotions which, according to say Madhyamaka Swatrantika schools or Swatrantika or Chittamatra schools, a state of mind or emotion which they may consider to be non-delusive, non-delusory. But from the point of view of Madhyamaka Prasangika's understanding of anatma or no soul doctrine, they would see that as again being delusory. Of course, this is a very complex point and would require a lot of study.
So now the important thing is that afflicted emotions, afflicted emotion is the ultimate enemy or the source of suffering. And also that is the afflicted emotion. Once it develops within our mind, it immediately destroys our peace of mind. And eventually it destroys our health. And also it destroys our friendship with other people. So all these negative activities, such as killing, or bullying, cheating, all these negative actions come out of this afflicted emotion. So that's the real enemy. That's the destroyer of our peace, destroyer of our fortune, and including our health. So therefore, that's the enemy, real enemy. External enemy today may be harmful to you, but next day may be very helpful. But this is the inner enemy, always remain as a destructive. And moreover, that enemy, wherever you live, always there. That is very dangerous. External enemy, we can put some defensive measure. And also, like 59, we escaped. So we can escape. But there is this enemy, even whether in Tibet or whether in Potala, whether in Dharamsala, whether here in London, enemy. Wherever I go, this enemy there. Even I think some kind of meditation, some kind of visualization of mandala. Still, in the very center of the mandala, that enemy is still there. So this is the point now. We have to realize that. Now so you see the real destroyer of our happiness, always there. How to do now? If there is, no possibility, if there is no possibility to overcome that, to eliminate that, then I think better forget. And I think relying more alcohol, sex, all these things, much better. If there is possibility to eliminate that, then I think now we must take this good opportunity. This is human body, human brain, human good heart. Combine these two things. Try to reduce that and eventually eliminate. So therefore, according to Buddhist teaching, our human body is precious. Why? Because of human intelligence. And the shaping or the changing our mind, not only through emotion, but mainly through intellectuals, reasoning. And there are two kinds of emotion. One emotion without any reason, just as a feel, such as hatred or these things. Of course, there are superficially some reasons. Or this person is very harming on me, and then through that kind of analyze, you develop hatred. But in deep down, it further goes, there's not much, reasons. So you see, these emotion, without proper reasons, that's the negative emotion. And the other kind of emotion, such as compassion, altruism, a kind of emotion, but with reasons. And to further investigate, you can prove that is something good, that is something necessary, that is something useful. So that kind of emotion is although the type of emotion, but very much validated, very much go well with reasons or intelligence. So the combination, intelligence and emotion, that is the way to change our inner world. So that also, I think, the basic fundamental, the suffering nature. So long that enemy there, so long we are under that enemy's control, no permanent happiness. So once you develop some kind of keen desire to overcome that enemy, now that is the
so that is called, that is the true realization of the aspiration to seek freedom, which is technically called renunciation in the Buddhist language.
So you see, we this practice, they analyze our emotional level and our inner world is the very important, key practice.
Scriptures say that so far as the desire to overcome sort of obvious sufferings, evident sufferings, which is the first level of suffering, so far as the desire to overcome that level of suffering is concerned, even the animals have that natural desire. And so far as the aspiration or the desire to free oneself or overcome the second level of suffering, the suffering of change is concerned, this is not something that is unique to the Buddhist path. Even non-Buddhists
and many ancient Indian non-Buddhist thought, you see, this
similar quest.
Inner tranquility through samadhi. So these, you see, the practitioner also, you see, fully realize the sensational happiness or pleasure is ultimately, you see, the
unsatisfying
and no use. So you see, that desire can develop. Now the maybe I think unique, or I don't know. You see, that is the 켜워도지기 동네 시시 녀몬배 샹원도 여바 드시도 다와요 말했을 때다 디 문집에 타네 녀몬을 깨닫지 돼야지 다 타버든 여러 간데.
So the true aspiration to seek liberation from suffering or liberation from samsara or to achieve moksha, it can only arise from a recognition of the third level of suffering, that is the dukkha of conditioning, where there is a recognition that so long as we remain under the domination and control of ignorance and the delusions, we are subject to suffering. There is no room for lasting joy and happiness. So based on that recognition, then one can truly develop a genuine desire to seek liberation or to seek moksha.
So now this is third noble truth. What is nirvana? What is moksha? Or what is nirodha? Cessation. It is something possible or not? Now that's the key question now.
So this relates, of course, to the third noble truth, that is the truth of cessation or moksha. Now, when talking about the truth of cessation, or liberation or moksha. If we were to say that we must accept the existence, the possibility of attaining moksha, because Buddha talked about moksha in the scriptures, I don't think that is satisfactory.
남들 나라리야 아니 다 남들 나리네 제 다 좋아하는 분들이 양다 디 쉽게 배중 나라리야 아니 동반이 있을 때야디 중세 고주를 있어 신도 고주 잘 시작이야 말이야 짜바체 리베 짜바체는 니주를 시작이야 리베 짜바체는 시주를 시작 도주를 시작 그래서 상황 있는 산에 통무주도 말이지 니 중세 고주 대전에 리베 보주이 되지
Here perhaps it is useful to reflect upon a point which Aryadeva makes in his 400 verses on the middle way, where he argues that when we talk about the ultimate nature of reality, the emptiness, we must understand that emptiness is not something, the understanding of which requires reliance on scriptural authority. It is something that we can approach through a critical analysis, through reasoning, and understand it. So emptiness, understanding of emptiness, or can arise from through a process of understanding, through reason. Therefore, in Buddhism, there is an understanding that within the phenomena which are evident to us, obvious to us, of course, we can perceive them directly. There is no need for any logical sort of proof. And then there is a second category of phenomena, which, although may not be obvious to us, but we can infer them through, based on our own direct perception of something. So we can infer them. These are technically known as the category of the slightly obscure phenomena, but they are not completely obscure because we can infer them, we can approach them through a reasoning process. So emptiness belongs to that category. And since emptiness belongs to that category, which is to say that emptiness could be approached through a reasoning process, that we can infer the truth of the emptiness. Therefore, we must also accept that moksha or liberation is something that can be understood through that process as well. Because as Nagarjuna says that a true understanding of moksha should be based on an understanding of emptiness, because moksha is nothing other than the total elimination or total cessation of delusion and suffering within emptiness, or through the insight of emptiness. So understanding of moksha, the concept of moksha, is very much related with the concept of the Buddhist concept of emptiness. And since emptiness can be approached and understood through inferential process, similarly, moksha should be also should be capable of being understood or approached through the similar rational process. Because of this sort of intimate connection between the Buddhist concept of emptiness and the Buddhist concept of moksha, in Abhisamaya Alamkara, which is a classical text written by Maitreya, when talking about the third noble truth, the truth of cessation or Nirodha, there is an extensive discussion of the 16 types of emptiness, 16 classes of emptiness.
얘네다 타바다 독립이 가서 그래. 다 독립 잠잠잠을 되더니 나와서 싶네.
So the fact that emptiness is an ultimate, the fact that moksha or liberation is an ultimate truth is something that is very explicitly discussed in Chandrakirti's writing.
자, 근데 과거에 여러 메시아데 다 독립이 잡아채는 뒤도 하나 다 과거에 중국이야.
So it seems that whether or not one can accept the possibility of moksha or liberation seems to be dependent on how well we understand the Buddhist concept of emptiness.
Some questions?
We have to finish this session at 11:30.
question answer
So I'm wondering whether I should carry through my explanation, presentation, or deal with the question and answers.
The question answer prefer
Those who would prefer to have a question answer now, if you can raise your hands. So those who prefer to have continued presentation.
Oh, this majority. You win now. So I think the evening session I will try to answer. So another 15 minutes I will speak. I will go
Continue now.
Continuously. 나 동반이 있어야 돼. 그래서 말해서 봐이나. 동반이 있어야 돼. 동 있어야 돼. 매력이 시거다. 지금 동스. 다가는 신기 다 매봐. 슬럽디에 다 있어야지 매봐. 다 가다 매배지는 시행이야.
So when we talk about the Buddhist concept of emptiness, of course it is obvious that we are talking about absence of something. We are talking about a form of negation. Similarly, when we talk about the Buddhist doctrine of anatman, or no soul, no self theory, again we are talking about a form of negation, a form of absence.
대 연구하다 가렸으나 배랑 안서 3년 날이야. 지 가서 그러면 레더로 지게 돼야지리야. 배는지 시나를 지게 돼서 그들이야. 다 든든다 말에 대 실러이나. 다 중심으로 돼 안 되지도 한다. 요 말에 사실 좀더 타져베이나. 아니 시나이네 저이네 이자로고 다좀 치버다 면도 하니. 요나면도.
So why this insistence on this absolute negation, either it is in the case of no self, anatman doctrine, or in the case of Buddhist doctrine of emptiness? Why this insistence on categorical rejection or categorical negation? Here, let us pause for a while and think about our own experience. For example, if we have a certain fear based on some kind of suspicion that there might be something here, then in order to dispel that fear, if we have the thought that maybe I'm being kind of deceived, maybe I'm being kind of projecting, maybe I'm projecting, then of course, although it will lessen your fear, but it wouldn't completely dispel it. But on the contrary, instead, if you develop the thought that this is pure illusion, there isn't anything here, I'm just imagining, and if your rejection or negation is that categorical, of course it will have an immediate impact on dispelling your fear.
다 워낙 가를 똥벌해. 가를 매버지 쓰고 슬라베이나. 아니 각세 똥 슬라베. 다이네 각세 슬다 그 관심도 와. 다오는 각세 근지를 슬라나.
So the question is, if that is the case, what is being negated here? What is it empty of? What are we talking about being emptied of? What is being negated here? Of course, the scripture says, it is an absence of the object of negation. We are negating something that is the object of this apprehension. And then it itself is not, not explanatory. So, of course, we have to go further and try to understand what is this? What is the actual object of negation?
No. Ta delia ta nang be shung na lo lia. Kansa rang ju tu be zai yu dong e da mi jik she. Tene ne song zi ni dong ki. Kana ka so da song zi ni dong da mi jik she. U men shung na lo le lo ne me la. Sukso ki tuan ki rangzhen naya jik yawashe. Rangzhen ta lo nime liya naya wang ki eni pata.
So here, we can see that the key really lies in our understanding of what is meant by Atman in the context of Anatman. And of course, depending upon one's own philosophical interpretations of this Buddhist doctrine, the Buddha's teaching on Anatman, or there will be differences in the identification of what is being negated here, the Atma in the context of negation. So what we find is in the Buddhist literature, there are varying degrees or varying subtleties in one's identification of this Atman, the object of negation. For example, this one level is where this Atman is identified as substantially real sort of soul that exists within all of us. And so the negation of that substantially real autonomous sort of agent or eternal soul is the meaning of Anatman. So that is one interpretation of the principle of Anatman. Then there is also another interpretation of that doctrine, which is the Chittamantra way of understanding it, where there is an acceptance that there is an understanding that the fundamental ignorance is not so much the belief in this substantially real eternal soul principle, but rather it is an acceptance or a belief in the reality of the physical world. And there is this understanding that the fundamental ignorance is the belief in the duality of mind and matter. And so the object to be negated in the context of Anatman is this belief in this duality of mind and matter. So that is another interpretation of the doctrine of Anatman. Then there is, of course, the Madhyamaka Svatrantika understanding of emptiness, where there is an understanding that although things come into being as a result of causes and conditions, and although sort of much of the status of existence is in some sense dependent on our perception, but still there is sort of some kind of intrinsic reality to the things and events, and that is so. What is being negated here is in some sense the independence of objects from the perception. So the negation of that is the emptiness. But from the point of view of Madhyamaka Prasangika school, even that is not the final meaning of the Buddhist teaching on Anatman. From the Madhyamaka Prasangika's view, so long as we have not deconstructed or dismantled this notion of any intrinsicness, a notion of any objectivity to the status of things and events, and then we are still grasping at things as real and things as objectively existent, things as enjoying some kind of independent status. So what is being negated in the context of the doctrine of emptiness is the intrinsic reality, the intrinsic existence and identity of things and events. And the negation of that is the subtle meaning or the true meaning of the doctrine of emptiness. So we see here depending on one's own interpretation, philosophical interpretations of the Buddhist teaching on anatman, you have varying or differing understanding of what is to be negated.
Did Tamik Dusu Mendra Didi Kasore, did Samalogi, any Dangzil Nutabji Cheba the Chebji, Landagi, any Kasore, Landag Namshan Joyalia, Manubici, the Shijalo Shay.
So what is common to all these four schools, which have differing interpretations of the Buddhist teaching on emptiness or anatman, what is common to all of them is to bear in mind that while we are engaged in a task to counteract the force of our grasping at Atman, our grasping at the self, it is also important to ensure that our negation does not defy the reality of the conventional world, the reality of our lived world of experience, that the karmic world and karmic operations are not destroyed by the negation. There is an understanding that the causality, the world of causality, should not be negated in the process of our understanding emptiness.
Tongbani Tanda, Jishbishi never drank Yajida. Tongbani never developed the churchy, any lad and debut, tangent devil, Jimmy Chile, never tell out on drank Yadi. The Casore. Can you assume the Sunshadi?
So it seems that in terms of arriving at a philosophical standpoint and a form of sort of analysis that would enable the individual to not only be thorough and sort of complete in one's analysis of negating Atman and arriving at emptiness, but at the same time ensuring that the world of interdependence, the world of dependent origination, the world of karma and the world of pratitya samuppada is not destroyed, but in fact, on the contrary, reaffirmed. It seems that Madhyamaka Prasangika's understanding of the doctrine is perhaps the most successful here.
So that is our Gobuludugi, Zawasham Zonda. Tension never Juakan, then it don't want you to share.
Here, it may be useful to reflect on a very important passage from Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way, Madhyamaka Mula Karika, where he states that that which is dependently originated, I call that empty.
That tension never join, but you said to Chedi, any Tombani race at the kind, but the
and that is in turn dependently designated. So the idea is that whatever is dependently originated is empty in the ultimate sense, and that empty phenomena are dependently designated.
So today you do put ten and talk about race, never marva. Ten and Tani Orva. Could ten and talk about one of the modules left to correction to Marisadua. Tinu Umelaminos, Tiny Sigdua.
So the fact that things and events are dependently designated implies that they are not non-existent, they are not mere nothingness. So what we find here is the way in which understanding of pratitya samuppada, dependent origination, and the understanding of emptiness together enables the individual to tread the middle way, thus avoiding the extremes of absolutism and nihilism.
Tene takwa sayagi sik taka chigogi koya nalariya. Tene slabdu tempati. 고용도가. 제도산에 떠봐 매매 라와 제와디 고용도가. 딱 슬르드산에 매봐 말이 열어 봐. 때네 딱 배고는 줘. 딱도 열어 봐. 줘 되네.
So this Madhyamaka expression, dependently designated, has a deep significance, because the first part of the expression, dependently, sort of implies that things and events come into being by dependence on other factors, which means that they do not possess independent existence. They do not possess some kind of autonomous, absolute status of existence. They come into being only as a result of dependence upon causes and conditions. So that first part of the expression negates absolutism. So the second part, which is of the expression, which it says designated, implies that they are not mere nothingness. They are not non-existence. They do exist. So that part of the expression ensures that the reality of the phenomenal world is not destroyed.
자상가 부터벌리든 알로리아 뭐니기 좀나 때내다고 지샤스. 때려도 뭐니기 좀이나 때내다고 하는 거.
So therefore Buddhapalita states in his commentary on Madhyamaka Mula Karika, he states that if things and events exist with independent existential status, that they come into being without dependence on other factors, then why are the designations dependent? Why there is this dependent designation, interrelated designation?
다다 그렇게서 나다 physics 나로네 quantum physics 쉐이잖아요. reality 사디 쉐카우도스 가셔 됐어도.
It seems that sort of related to this point, it seems through speaking with various physicists, I was told that according to the quantum mechanical understanding of the physical world, they are beginning to have problems of in fact postulating this idea of reality. Even reality as a concept is becoming a problem.
So
what does this, for me, what is it points towards is the difficulty of finding, or it's the problems of finding essences when we searched sort of into the essence of things. However, if we jump into the other extreme and say that this is pure illusion and everything is just mere projections of the mind, then we will be falling into the trap of where the Chittamatras fell, which is total mentalism.
So that one, any Shiva Bashi membership, the Shiva Bashi solid, Shiva Nangsha Samimba, any quarter mobile country showers love. Can't talk about one. You intended too much son, parlor jog or to do around Terra. Then it didn't don't share.
So now the question is that things do not possess intrinsic realities. Things do not possess objective, independent, existential statuses. Yet at the same time, we are not happy with the conclusion that everything is mere projections of the mind. So the question is, where is the middle way? Where what is the alternative? So here, Madhyamaka say that things and events come into being purely as a result of aggregations of many factors. And it's on the basis of that aggregation of causes and conditions and many factors, then we impute identities upon that aggregation.
So now, no time for meditation. So while you are eating or meditate something about Shunya. Thank you. See you again. Yes.
Listening to you is a joy.